if you want to.
Mayor LaRue, we are ready and we are live.
Thank you, Sarah. Okay, welcome members of council and staff to this special committee of the whole meeting re-budget. And I call the meeting to order. And the recommended action is that the special committee of the whole agenda for September 22, 2021 be approved as presented. A mover and a seconder, please. Councilor LaRose and Councilor Mayette, all in favor. That is carried. Thank you. If anyone has a declaration of pecuniary interest, they may so do or at the appropriate time. And with that, I will pass it on to Finance and Corporate Services Chair Jill Sinema.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Before we get into the nuts and bolts of the 2022 draft budget number 1, first I'd like to say thank you very much to the staff and the leadership team. I can only imagine how challenging it's been to work towards the guidelines that we provided for the budget process, and we're still trying to maintain our service levels and the capital projects that have been requested. So thank you very much for this draft budget. Before turning the meeting over to our treasurer, Carrie Robillard, our CIO, Mr. Jeff Lees, would like to say a few words. So Mr. Lees, there you are.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I appreciate this opportunity, and thank you to committee, of the whole for listening to me for a minute or so. I guess my opening comment would just be that it's been an interesting 12 months on a number of fronts, as committee and council is aware. Certainly, COVID has played a significant role, not only planning for the unknown, but also being expected to operationalize some pretty complicated regulatory changes at the flick of a switch, which, as council is aware, things happened very fast when changes were introduced by the province. Some provincial cost downloads, as we're all aware of. Certainly development activity, which is a big one for us, is at a record high in the town of Penetanguishene. And development activity, while it's good and development is a positive sign, it certainly creates a ripple effect throughout a number of departments, not only planning and development, but also transportation, engineering, right through to all departments. There's been an increase in customer service activity, bylaw enforcement, roads work orders, corporate service requests, and the list goes on and on. I've only named a few. Our outdoor spaces certainly have been utilized at probably the highest extent that they have been ever in the municipality, which again is a very positive sign, seeing people come to the community that might not otherwise be spending time in Penetanguishene. And with that comes impacts to parks, trails, outdoor rec amenities, etc., and subsequently has operational as well as capital budget impacts. We've saw the Ontario Consumer Price Index rise from 3.3% to 4% from April to August, which again, I think is indicative of the times that we're within. And I've probably missed a few, but those are some pretty key ones that I thought I would touch on. As a result of that, what you're seeing in the draft budget, draft version, budget 1 in front of you is a number of pinch points in this year's draft budget. An extreme amount of work has gone into the draft budget by staff, as Madam Chair has identified, not only in senior management, but also at all levels throughout the organization to get to the 2.1% that the draft is being presented at. Staff has scrutinized the budget to the nth degree without cutting or making changes to impact service levels. And the other key point is also without introducing or inserting unsustainable funding sources, so reserves, for example, which might be a solution for year 1, but it certainly is not sustainable, as council is aware. Some requests, and I'll use staffing for example, looked very different at the first introduction of them than what they do today in front of you in draft version 1. We've presented asks that we're comfortable with, given the collective picture, without affecting service levels, but also recognizing there are a number of competing priorities and asks. So in other words, the asks, as you'll see on page 3 of the Treasurer's report, operationally and capital-wise, we're much different. We're much different at the first go about of the budget than what they are today. And as council is aware, when we put together and propose the draft budget, we look at a number of key documents, as the Treasurer has identified in her report. But certainly we always point back to the community-based strategic plan that council has approved for 2019 right through to 2023. So everything we do and present ties back to that. It's fair to say that it's been a trying 12 months for everyone. I think there's a number of opportunities that present themselves with the 2022 budget process. Tonight is really just an initial presentation. As council is aware, and hopefully the public is aware, there's several opportunities down the road to look at different components within the budget. We recognize that the budget being presented today is not within the 1.5% that council asked. And while it's not perfect, it is draft version 1, and there's some difficult decisions to be made. Ultimately, what we're looking for from a staff perspective tonight is some guidance and direction so that we can come back on October 27th with our draft version 2 at the public consultation. And then just echoing Madam Chair's comments, Carrie and her team in finance, our entire senior management team, right through to our middle management team and our frontline staff have all played a role in this budget to some degree or another. And it's really neat to see the teams band together collectively when it comes time to budget, because there's a lot of creative and innovative thinking that goes into it, as council is aware. So with that, Madam Chair, those are my remarks, and I appreciate committee indulging me for a few minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. CAO. Greatly appreciated. So the first thing we'll move on to is the consent agenda, which there is nothing. And we'll move on to the matters for consideration. So to get this on the table, the recommended action is that the 2022 budget draft number 1 report and related budget documents be received for information and discussion. And that staff amend the budget as directed. If I could have a mover, Councillor Clue, and a seconder, Councillor LaRose. And I will turn it over to our treasurer, Kira Robillard, for discussion and then questions. Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I see that my my video is frozen, so I mustn't have a very good signal here in my office. So I will. I'll just start and start with the presentation. No need for the video. So good evening and welcome to our first special budget meeting for draft 1 to review 2022 budget, operating and capital. In terms of my initial draft 1 budget report, I'll go through it, and as you know, hard copies of binders have been provided to council members and staff related to the more detailed information that is presented in the binder by section. So certainly I'm not going to be going through all of that information in detail, but if anybody has any questions related to a specific section, certainly the senior managers are here and can speak to it, and I can assist in that regard. So just to kick it off, starting with the background, and I think as everybody knows, our process was documented in an annual budget procedure policy that I think has been running smoothly in the past, and we continue to follow that process. It has been linked to my report as a relevant background report. It identifies the budget process, and certainly with our public consultation coming up next month, as well as the other special committee, the whole budget meetings, it encourages public participation. I will just, I guess, remind everybody that our 2022 budget public consultation is going to be held at 6 o'clock on October 27th. So when we were back here in June, I presented the town's municipal price index that was calculated at that time. It did come in at 1.5%. And as directed by council, that was what we were striving to achieve in draft one. We have taken into account a conservative estimate of new growth from the development that has been going on in our town. So when we take into account that new taxation growth of 1%, the tax impact of no more than 1.5% obviously is still our goal. Jeff just mentioned, the CAO just mentioned that the CPI rate has increased since June when this report was presented. It was at 3.3% in Ontario, and recently it increased, I believe it's 4.0% now. Also, at that time, back in June, we did provide budget survey results that we published and put out to the public, as well as council and management. So those budget survey results were provided and presented and reviewed with council back in June, and the link to those survey results are also attached to this report. So again, in a nutshell, the presentation tonight for draft one, we are currently sitting at 2.1% tax impact that we obviously were trying to achieve 1.5%. I'll get into how we arrived at the 2.1%, as well as what it would take to get us down to 1.5%. Included in that 2.1% is a negative 1% budget decrease for the town of about $109,000. Also included in that 2.1% is a 3.1% tax impact from policing and the loss of the CNCC cost recovery from the ministry, to the tune of about $346,000 for policing. And so the net impact of 2.1 is about an annual budget increase of about $236,000. So as we know, with the large policing tax impact for this year, in the past, if everybody remembers, we did have some savings that we achieved years ago when the OPP billing model became standardized in the province. We put that money away in a policing reserve, and annually we have been drawing on that reserve to stabilize the tax impact on our policing budget and the resulting levy. So this draft one budget has done the same thing. With the loss of the CNC cost recovery of about the cost recovery specifically is $376,000 over last year. but with other policing grants that we're getting and a change to the structure of those policing grants, the net impact is about $346,000 for 2022. That is after we have already stabilized the total impact using our policing reserve and using the balance in the policing reserve of $108,000. So the 4% total tax impact has, it's about 4.1%, has been offset by a transfer from the policing reserve to stabilize that impact down to where it is currently in the draft 1 budget of 3.1%. I will add that certainly the contract amount, the OPP contract amount in draft 1 hasn't changed over last year's budget. And that's because we don't have the 2022 OPP billing estimate yet. And last year we got it at the end of September. So at this point in time, the total impact of the policing that I keep referring to will be finalized once we get our billing estimate, and will be updated and represented to council in draft number 2 in October. So I'll just quickly go through the budget process and where we started out departmentally, and then after we had departmental management budget meetings to where we arrived at with draft 1 and what we're presenting to you this evening. So originally, senior managers worked on their departmental budgets, provided them to the finance department, and the operating increase over last year was about $447,000 or 3.9%. The capital taxation program at that original stage was anticipated to be $1.435 million, so a $100,000 increase over the prior year. The 2022 capital budget was at about 5.8 million, and the 23 capital budget was at about $5.4 million. So that's where we began when we put all of the departmental budgets together. We then met to review them with all management by department and discussed where we could make some changes to get that taxation impact down. And we did, in terms of operating, down to a 3% impact or $345,000. The 2022 capital taxation budget remaining status quo where it is today, which is 1.335 million. And then we reduced the capital program for 2022 and 2023 to about 4.4 million per year. And then finally, with additional information that was coming in and some last minute changes before we finalized draft 1, we did come to our final draft 1, which you're looking at this evening. And again, that's a $236,000 operating increase or a 2.1% taxation impact, a reduction of 1.8% from where we began back in, I guess, August, when all of the budget documents were prepared over the summer. The capital taxation budget for 2022 is currently status quo in draft 1 at 1.335 million. And our 2-year capital program is about 4.2 million per year. So we have done some work. We have sharpened our pencils and discussed how, once we brought all departmental budget requests together, how that impacts the town organization as a whole. And we have done a lot of work to get it down to this, this current draft. Again, as Jeff mentioned, we do use corporate key documents when preparing our budget documents and presenting to council. So for example, community-based strategic plan, the official plan, our community improvement plan, fire master plan, as well as recreation master plan, Penetanguishene cycling strategy, development charges background study, climate change action plan, service excellence strategy, service delivery review, and water and wastewater rate studies. So obviously that's a lot of information. That's a lot of different angles that we have to look at when senior managers and management and each department, as well as finance and the management team as a whole, has to look at the entire budget from all of those perspectives. So again, I will just reiterate the fact that the 1% reduction to town operating is just that. It is operating. Capital year over year in draft 1 is at a 0% increase. So we're keeping the, currently we have the 2022 capital taxation budget with no change, no increase over last year at 1.335 million. We've also, in the draft 1, have it remaining the same in 2023 at 1.335 million. With the policing impact of $346,000 or 3.1%, again, that's where we're at in terms of 2.1% potential tax impact. Not only is the town capital taxation base budget remaining the same in this draft, so are the three main capital investments that we also make to our asset management reserve, as well as the public works equipment and vehicle reserve, as well as the fire equipment and vehicle reserve. So they're remaining the same over last year. Asset management annual investment is $285,000. Public works vehicle and equipment reserve remains the same at just over $159,000, and the fire vehicle and equipment reserve remains the same at $150,000. So as far as the major drivers of these budget changes, I have summarized them in my report. Most of them remain the same annually year over year. So that obviously things like salary, wages, remuneration, and benefits, and insurance. Those are major drivers that affect our budget annually. And in this case, and in this draft, annual impacts for those two items I just discussed is $100,000 or a 1% increase to the tax rate. Insurance is about $110,000 or 1% change in the tax rate. Now, insurance, we're kind of in a catch-up budget mode for insurance this year because last year we did receive a higher increase to our premium than we had anticipated or that we had budgeted for. So we're now bringing the budget up to the current amount, as well as estimating another increase for 2022. We do have an insurance reserve to offset high volatility in any particular year in terms of insurance premiums. It's not sustainable. However, it certainly could be used for stabilization to smooth out large years with increases. So that has not been included in draft 1, but certainly it's a funding option as we proceed through this process and try to achieve our goal of 1.5%. Certainly over the past few years, we have been increasing our investment in our IT, online services, security, things like that, and we continue to do that. So certainly with our municipal modernization funding that we received from the government, as well as spending that has occurred to date on improving our online services, using that funding, there does, there is an annual operating cost increase related to most of these improvements as it pertains to annual maintenance agreements and support. So just to highlight that annually, certainly it's, one of our priorities that we will continue to invest in our IT infrastructure. This year in this draft, the impact from that is $37,000 or 0.3% tax impact. Those are the major budget increases included in draft 1. There's also some major budget changes related to revenues that would offset, obviously, those increases. So I've highlighted them as well. Certainly our revenues included in this draft have increased over last year, and that would be obviously due to our facilities reopening and our revenues being budgeted that, we're getting closer to normal, maybe closer to 2019 pre-COVID revenues coming in. So there was some, I guess, cautiously optimistic revenue increases related to the reopening of facilities and programs and other revenues that we anticipate in the amount of about $190,000 in our budget, which is a reduction to the tax rate of 1.7%. The other large increase to our revenues, not huge, but large, it impacts our budget by a half a taxation percentage. The sewage treatment plant does pay the town a payment in lieu of taxes based on the assessment of the building, and the assessment has finally caught up to, let's say, the new current value assessment on the expansion and the new building. So they are now being billed based on MPAC's reassessment of the building and for the sewage treatment plant. So to the town operating budget, that's an impact of $60,000 more. And then I also mentioned, obviously, the 1% conservative estimate for new taxation, which is about $113,000 in increased new taxation. And there's a slight budget increase related to supplemental and omitted taxation. And again, that's MPAC catching up on reassessing new development with all the development that's going on. So the budget, last year's budget for supplemental and omitted tax bills has been increased slightly by about $23,000 this year. In a nutshell, those are the major budget changes. There are obviously other major budget changes that are outside of this particular draft number 1, and we will get to that later on in the report. But again, those are the major changes that bring us to where we're at $236,000 tax impact of 2.1%. I also just wanted to mention, similar to last year, MPAC has deferred their provincial reassessment that was supposed to be done in 2020 and then phased in over the next 4 years. So due to COVID, they've they've confirmed that they will not be doing it, or they haven't confirmed when they will be doing it. So the 2022 assessment values for property owners will remain the same. So they won't see any change to their assessment related to provincial reassessment. The next page of my report just summarizes the budget and compares it to 2021, showing the year-over-year variance, and it's by division or department, as well as section. So for finance and corporate services, the year-over-year change from last year is an increase in revenues of a net change of reduction of $257,000, or negative 6.3% over last year. And that's mainly due to the anticipated new assessment growth, as well as the completion and payout of the fire debenture. The fire department's year-over-year budget went down by about $163,000. For planning and development, very slight increase, basically a break even over the prior year. So it's $2,900 variance over 2021. For transportation and environmental, which includes transit, it's $167,000, or a 5.4% budget increase over the prior year. The majority of that really is due to the transit program. And as far as the transit program, similar to the policing levy, the transit program, we were also stabilizing the impact of the transit program using our transit reserve. So we would annually transfer monies from the transit reserve to offset increased operating and contract costs related to our transit program. However, we also purchased a new bus using that transit reserve. So that reserve has been depleted with the purchase of the bus. So there is not that stabilization mechanism in there anymore. So that impacted the transit budget as well. Increased operating and contract costs for the shared service with the town of Midland. There's an anticipated large increase related to that as well. So the impact for the transit program over last year is $100,000. For recreation and corporate services, they're below their total budget over last year, and that's mainly due to increased revenues that they're anticipating and budgeting for 2022. The library is at a slight 1% budget increase over last year of about $4,800. So this document summarizes how the town operating budget is coming in at $9.5 million, which is about $109,000 less than 2021. In terms of the rate supported departments, they're summarized here as well. The building and the building department annual increase for 2022 is about $8,800. or 4.2%. The water department is about $15,000 or 1.1%. And wastewater treatment is about $132,000 or 5.6%. Again, I mentioned to you that they did see a large increase in their payment in lieu based on the assessment, as well as some other operating expense increases that they're anticipating. Overall, when you combine both tax supported and rate supported departmental budgets, last year we were at 15.5 million and this year 15.9 million, an increase of about $380,000 combined tax and rate supported, or 2.4%. Attachments to my report expand on that summary that I just reviewed for council. So it does expand on the history. So there is 2019 actual, 2020 actual, as well as 2020 budget. If council had any questions related to the detailed one, certainly don't hesitate. Keep in mind, 2020 actual results, even 2021 year-to-date results are not the norm due to COVID. So I think when we are looking at 2022 budgets and estimates, really and truly, we've been looking at 2019 as the norm and maybe just trying to ease our way back to those 2019 actual levels in terms of revenues, certainly, and in some cases, expenses. I'll just briefly summarize other budget documents that, one in particular, attachment number 4 to my report. We did receive budget documents for their 2022 request from Severn Sound Environmental Association. So they are attached to the report as attachment number 4. They are looking for an increase to their budget. They're asked for a contribution from the town for their operating expenses, as well as risk management services and the Severn Sound sustainability piece to their program. $2,300 or about 2.1%. Huronia Airport's 2021 total budget request was $58,600. And it was just recently approved at the HAC board meeting, so I didn't receive it in time to include it in this report. But I did receive it, I believe, on Friday, so it will be included with their 2022 budget request in draft number 2 being presented in October. The Economic Development Corporation of North Simcoe, via an email I received, they are requesting a 2022 budget request of $83,891, which is based on 0.75% of our 2020 town and policing levy, which is a $2,200 increase or 2.7% over the prior year. So the other budget requests that are not included in draft 1 are listed in my report, and if not a staffing report, which is to follow in this meeting, in this agenda, The other items related to accessible transit program, a new accessible transit program, as well as an increase to the preventative maintenance program. There are links to previous reports that council reviewed related to the accessible transit, as well as the 5-year preventative maintenance program report that was presented just last this month, actually September 8th. So those are other budget requests outside of draft 1 that obviously impact our current tax impact of 2.1%. The accessible transit program is anticipated to cost $120,000, which is a 1.1% taxation impact. The increase to the 2022 preventative maintenance program of $65,000 is a 0.6% taxation impact. And thirdly, under transportation environmental, an increase to their contract staffing costs related to restructuring some of their contract staff. Another 0.6% taxation impact at about $63,000. And the fourth item is from planning and development, and it's related to a staffing request for their current junior planner that's under contract to change it to a permanent full-time position. The budget impact of that is just over $32,000 or a 0.2% taxation impact. So in total, that's $280,000 over and above draft 1, which is a total 2.5% taxation impact to be considered by council. And obviously, to be considered, you need to know the whole picture. So where we're at, we will find out certainly where we're at now, but certainly where we're going to be next month in draft 2 when we finalize and actually know what our 2022 policing costs are going to be. As well as what other service levels or changes to service levels can be done or should be done should any of these other additional requests be a priority for council. So how do we fund that? So we do not currently have any sustainable annual source of funding for these asks. So it would have to be changes to the current draft of our budget. The other community financial request related to our community capital grant program. Again, there's a separate report for later on in the agenda this evening, but I just listed basically in my report that we did receive one prior to the July 31st deadline, a $10,000 capital request from Georgian Bay Cancer Support Center. We did get a follow-up from Georgian Bay General Hospital apologizing for missing the deadline, but they also submitted a request again just recently, so it didn't get there wasn't enough time to include it in this particular draft, but they are requesting $15,000 similar to what council approved last year. I will include that in draft number 2. In total, that would be next draft, that would be a total of $25,000 being requested. And that particular funding line is already in our budget, our current draft 1 budget under community contributions. And that particular program is funded by the Community Development Reserve. Also, I mentioned in my report that the Culture Alliance did reach out to us, and that they were indeed, planning on requesting another $10,000 annual operating contribution. So again, that doesn't fall under the eligibility criteria of our capital grant program. However, they have, in the past, council has approved that, whether it be from their Good Idea Fund, contingency fund, or whether it be from the Community Development Fund Reserve. So they are asking for another $10,000 in 2022. They've also reached out to the clerk to schedule a future delegation to council. The other attachments to my report, as I mentioned, there is the 3-year operating budget that has some historical information. It's by department as well as by section. So that's included as attachment 1. Attachment 2 is management's 10-year capital plan. Again, as I mentioned, the taxation base for the capital program is $1.335 million for 2022 and 2023. And the total capital program for those 2 years is about $4.2 million per year. The total 10-year capital program is $37.5 million. Again, I won't go through the particular capital projects, but certainly council's welcome to discuss any of them, and certainly senior managers can answer any questions related to them. Attachment 3 is just our capital funding summary. So basically it outlines exactly where that 10-year $37.5 million capital program, where the funds are coming from or proposed to be coming from on an annual basis. Whether it be debt, development charges, reserve transfers, subsidies, taxation, water, wastewater rates. Attachment number 4 is our annual an annual inclusion in our budget process now, which is our 10-year fleet replacement schedule. And then finally, as I mentioned, attachment number 5 is the actual documented budget request related to Severn Sound Environmental Association. By section, in the agenda, but as well as in your hard copy budget binders, each section is broken down and divided, and included in there is the department's 2022 budget goals and objectives. Their detailed operating budget. The 10-year capital plan is broken down by section as well. So by section, the 10-year capital plan is included in the agenda as well as in the binder. And finally, for each of those capital projects for 2022 and 2023, specifically, there are capital budget project justification sheets for each capital project. So that's a summary of our budget process to date, as well as certainly a summary of where we are currently at in terms of draft number 1, following council's direction back in June, and welcome any comments, questions, directions, so that we can keep on moving forward to the next draft and the next budget meeting in October.
Thank you very much, Carrie. That was it's very, you've been very thorough, provided lots of information. I'm sure that council has questions. So where would you like to start, or who would like to start? No requests? Councillor Valvancourt.
Thank you, and thank you, Madam Treasurer and Mr. CAO, for your presentations. Just a question with respect to the municipal price index. It was calculated some months ago, and I think you touched on the CPI, but I don't know if you touched on the municipal price index and what it's been trending at lately. I don't know if you've done that calculation or not. Thank you.
Through to you, Madam Treasurer.
No, I mean, I haven't. Certainly the MPI, in terms of the way it's trending, it's a subjective, review of CPI, as well as some other indexes related to construction and utilities, and analysis of our historical costs and the way our costs are trending. I did not go through the exercise again to recalculate it. However, because we always do present it to council in June for direction, as we work on our budget process in July and August. Having said that, with CPI trending upwards, you can almost guarantee that if I were to go through the exercise again, it would certainly come back at a higher calculation. Having said that, it is a subjective and not an index you can go look up online like you can for CPI, but appreciate your comment.
Mayor LaRue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to really touch on a fact that we know that increase in our budget for this coming 2022 year has been impacted greatly by the cost of policing at CNCC. And I just want to inform and let council know that late last week, I did receive an email from Solicitor General Jones thanking us very much for our participation at AMO and indicating that her department would be in touch with us soon. And as I said, that's about a week and a half or so ago. I do intend to write the Solicitor General again, reiterating that we want and require and request a face-to-face meeting, and we are going to CC the Premier on this. We will keep council abreast and in the loop, and we'll have a report at our October 13th council meeting, and at which time, if need be, I will probably be looking at an in-camera session. So at the moment, there's not a great deal of input that can be done in regards to what is showing in the tax increase. due to that CNCC.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Levy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to address the accessible transit. And as I represent Penetanguishene on the Transit Committee, I would just like to point out that for those who don't know, the new Penetanguishene bus actually is so much more accessible than the last one. I see daily people boarding in wheelchairs and easily on walkers. The step comes down and then goes back up again. So I am wondering if our needs are quite as great now with the new bus as it was when we had the little bus. It didn't really, well, it barely took people on walkers, let alone wheelchairs. So it's lovely to see people every day wheel down in their wheelchairs, get aboard the bus, and off they go. And of course, the Lynx bus actually kneels as the European buses do. And so the entire county has become, including Penetanguishene, has become much more accessible. So I would like perhaps Brian to respond to whether our needs are as great with the new bus as they used to be. Thank you.
Thank you. Through Madam Chair to Councillor Levy. Yes, I would agree with that. I would agree with the fact that our buses, from an operational perspective, is much more accessible. The features on it are more geared to our ridership. The accessible transit report that I brought forward to council earlier this year brought forward options, and as a result of that direction, it's being brought forward to council for consideration as part of this budget process. And obviously, it is a decision of council whether or not they would like to proceed with that service, and that's why it's being brought forward to council tonight for consideration. But certainly, Councillor Levy's comments are well taken, and I would agree with that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Murray. Any other comments or concerns or need clarification? Councillor Clue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to circle back again to the policing cost recovery. So I'm trying to do the quick math, and math is not my strong suit, but if we're looking at that as a 3.3% change in our tax rate, if that issue was not presented to us currently, perhaps our treasurer could speak to this, our tax impact would then be much more reasonable, much more what we're looking for. Is that correct? So this is a big one for us. Yeah.
Through you, Madam Chair, to Councillor Clue, absolutely. Certainly without this particular issue, we would be in a position to consider, the staffing requests to keep up and to keep up with service levels, and without making hard decisions to change service levels. Absolutely. I mean, currently we're in an overall 1% reduction, so there's room to there would have been room to address some of the other budget issues that come up, every year, and not as a difficult a decision as this particular year with the loss of $376,000. strictly with the OPP contract, but in total, you know, whether a 4% total tax impact, policing reserve aside, because, you know, that's our money. So policing reserve aside, it was a 4.1% tax impact.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Treasurer. And point well taken, Councillor Clue. Obviously, if we weren't looking at that huge expense and not knowing the way it's going to go at this particular point, it certainly changes the dynamics as to what, you know, where we want to move ahead with the budget in general. But if there aren't any questions as far as the other information. Oh, Carrie, did you want to say something? Sorry.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I did forget to mention one thing. So at the beginning of the meeting, I did identify this is where we're at. You know, we tried to get down to 1.5 as originally planned and directed by council. With this policing unknown, I mean, it's certainly an impact, but the total impact is unknown because we don't have that 2022 billing estimate. Is it going to be, you know, 4.1%? Is it going to be 3%? Use our reserve, bring it down to 2%. We don't know, but we'll know in hopefully a week. Hopefully a week we'll know. What I just wanted to make council aware is how do we get to 1.5? Because I did do that exercise. So how do we get to 1.5? Leaving things as they are in draft 1 and no other consideration. In addition to that policing reserve transfer of $108,000, which brings us down to 2.1, to get us to 1.5 today, outside budget requests and other changes to come, put aside for the moment, it would take $75,000 to get us down to 1.5% tax impact, which council could do using our new tax stabilization reserve. Having said that, we're using the town's tax stabilization reserve to stabilize the policing levy, which we're already using $108,000 of to stabilize it, but to stabilize it even further, we do have access to council, you know, could make the decision to use those funds to stabilize the impact of this loss. But again, that's just to put that information out there. We will know what the exact number is that we're dealing with in the next draft and at the next meeting.
Thank you very much for that information, Madam Treasurer. It certainly does help that there are options that are available. At this point, are you as a council ready to go ahead and vote? Because we're not really asking to make any changes to this budget based on the information that we have right now. So we're that being said, oh, Your Worship.
Madam Chair, I can't see why it would be an issue because we are only asking it to be received as information. So.
Thank you. Councillor Levy.
Yeah, my question would be, how can staff come back to us with any changes if we don't offer changes or ask for changes? They're going to be sitting down tomorrow or the next day and saying, what are we going to do? Are they going to take what we're offering? Because at this point, it's in our hands. Mm-hmm. Staff has done an amazing job, as always, on the budget. And we have to start throwing it out there as suggestions now on how to get that reduction, because if we say, you know, receipt for information, everything's tickety-boo, what do they come back? That's the question. I'm sure the treasurer and the CAO and the department heads would like to hear us say, cut this, cut that, or use this reserve, use that reserve. So I think we have to jump in here now and offer suggestions. We don't have to necessarily approve or vote on each suggestion, but give them something to work with. So I'll start. EDCNS, 83,891, $2,200 dollar increase. Let's just say no. I'm a passionate board member of EDCS and the longest serving board member there, but they haven't done anything this year. Everything's at a standstill. There must be a lot of money in the budget, and I wish I could tell you offhand. I could tell you tomorrow, but anyway, 2,200, 2,500, it's a starting point. So that's my suggestion. I have a few others, but I'd like to see the rest of you jump in and say, let's cut a little here, a little there, and get staff to come back with us and tell us where we can move from there. Fair enough, Madam Chair?
Yes, thank you for that suggestion. On that note, with the ECDNS, we don't get a budget. We don't get any information from them as such when they're requesting those budget increases. They are strictly using a percentage of our tax levy. I would, when we go back to them, if part of the request is to not accept their request as a council, I think I would like to see them provide us with a budget breakdown similar to what we get from the airport and also from the SSEA. Thank you. Councillor Levy?
Yeah, Madam Chair, may I be so bold as to correct you? We actually do see during their presentation, they do give us their budget. Normally, we haven't seen it yet. I have been told they're coming to make a presentation. Perhaps Clerk Stacy Cooper could clarify that, but they should be ready to come and make a presentation with their budget. If not, I will urge them to do it. Stacy, oh, sorry, Madam Chair.
Okay. Stacy, go ahead. Or Madam Clerk.
Thank you. So I have been speaking to Sharon recently about speaking to council. It's unrelated to, a yearly review. It's more related to the York University agreement and some granting opportunities that they were looking into, which hasn't formalized into an official request, but that's the only conversation I've had with Sharon Bay recently. So certainly I'm sure it's probably on her list of things to do, but the contact that I've had has been not related to that type of delegation.
Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, Councillor Levy?
Yeah, I will reach out to both Sharon and our chair, Ted Salisbury, tomorrow and make sure they at least send something via correspondence so that we can see what they are doing. And yeah, because we can't just accept that they need this money, they'll spend this money. As I said, I'm a huge supporter, but we still need the information to go on. So I guess we're in a holding pattern on them. Sorry to raise that, but all bets are off at budget time. We all have to step up.
Right, thank you very much. Any other requests? Because what I was going to suggest, oh, sorry, Councillor Clue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You might actually answer it. Are we just trying to discuss operating budget right now?
Well, it is. I mean, it is the draft budget, and what we're trying to do is give some recommendations to staff as to how they, if any changes that they could come up with or other things that they could look at. Madam Treasurer, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Councillor Clue. No, absolutely. This evening we can talk about operating as well as capital projects. I guess, you know, maybe if we discussed operating first and then once there was no other comments related to operating, move on to capital, certainly. But if Madam Clerk can confirm, but if staff are receiving any direction tonight or any other future budget meeting from council, I believe in the past the clerk has taken notes or motions. Sorry, Stacey could probably clarify. But council needs to vote on each item or recommendation for a change in the budget.
Madam Clerk, if you can comment on that, please.
Sure, I'm happy to speak to it. I mean, we've handled it differently, you know, in all the different years I've been here, that we've handled it differently every time. I think where it just makes it really clear to everyone, and I think that's what we did in the last round, was, you know, let's make sure everyone wants staff to do this versus just one person saying it. So I'm happy to do it that way and track it and to take a vote, almost like adding to the referral item list. You know, someone says, hey, I want to do this. They make sure they get a seconder. We vote on it one by one. I'm happy to kind of take notes as we go with the potential changes. The first one was what Councillor Levy mentioned with EDCNS, and then just go through them. And if that's kind of the way that, if you think that would work the best, I'm happy to oblige. If
you're comfortable doing that, and then we can vote on them individually at the end, or as we go along.
We can do it either way. I think I just want to make it clear that, you know, versus like, hey, we could do this, we could do that, that a member of council say, hey, I move that we do this, so that it's more intentional versus me just trying to know if they're talking it through or actually looking for a change.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. Councillor Levy.
Sorry, I'm certainly not prepared to make a motion. I thought that Carrie was looking for us to throw out suggestions, and then staff would bring back a report saying, this is how we could achieve the goal. So just ignore me. I thought, and I know as Stacey said, we've done it all different ways, all different times. And I would imagine that we would want to receive tonight's report, but at the same time, throw out suggestions to give staff something to work with. So that's it for me.
Thank you very much. And I do believe the motion is worded in that regard, because it, like the second, and that staff amend the budget as directed. But I guess we have to be fairly specific if we're going to ask them to make those changes. But correct, Madam Clerk?
Sorry, yes. I mean, that's a perfect example. Is, you know, I wrote that down knowing that it was something, you know, just mentioned, but I think for staff to really, you know, take this seriously and try to come up with some significant changes to the budget, specific direction, I think in this circumstances is probably the best way to proceed, rather than just suggestions.
Okay. Councillor Vadaboncourt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As I indicated earlier, I thought it was an excellent presentation tonight. There's certainly lots to think about. As the mayor alluded to, there's a few unanswered questions as it pertains to policing costs. The treasurer's outlined that in order for us to get to our target of 1.5%, we need to find $75,000 in a $10 million budget. So I don't know if that task is going to be a huge task. I think that it's something that I think we can certainly accomplish if we put our minds to it. Today, my thinking is I want to digest what I've heard. I want to consider the various ideas that have emerged around the table. And when we come back and we're still in the situation where we need to find $75,000. I'm sure creatively we could get there. I think the other thing I would mention is certainly my focus right now is on the municipal budget, and that's certainly where I think we should be. However, I'm also cognizant of the other components that make up the tax bill, which is the education and the county levy and the bottom line tax bill. And certainly, you know, from my perspective, and I think I can say from other members of council, you know, is we would like to see a 0% tax rate increase. When I look at that, I look at the overall tax rate. So for me right now, I'm focused on the municipal portion. I'd like to get some more information. I'd like to digest what I heard. I think we have some conversation on a couple of other reports later on the agenda that may add or detract from the budget. Who knows? And then when we come back next time, maybe we can make some changes. Those would be my suggestions, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bottomcourt. And you are correct, is as far as the 75,000 for the budget as it sits right now, that would bring us down to the 1.5. But we do have these other requests that we'll be looking at as well. And so we'll have to be looking at ways to possibly fund them. So at this juncture, I would suggest that we, because there is more information that we, in my mind, that we're going to need from the policing part of it. But are there any questions in regard for the capital plan, or are you comfortable with the capital plan as presented? Questions or statements? Okay. All right. Oh, Councillor Clue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This one is a question on the capital plan to our Director of Recreation. I lost my page, but there is an item there for the resurfacing of Memorial Tennis Court to the tune of $130,000. I'm just curious, I thought we had resurfaced or done some sort of treatment not too long ago, and I'm curious if she could comment on that. If you're there. I know she wasn't feeling well yesterday, but.
Hi, sorry, I am here. Like Carrie, I'm having some camera issues, so I'll leave my camera off. The treatment that was done, I have it in my capital justification sheet that I'm just trying to pull up. I guess previous to my time with the town, so we reconstructed McGuire Court. This is for Memorial Court. And so previous to my time with the town, I guess they had tendered the project to reconstruct Memorial Court, and it came in significantly over budget. So at that point in time, they decided to just do a surface treatment to buy the town another 5 to 10 years. Don't quote me on the 5 to 10, whatever it is in the capital justification sheet. And unfortunately, there's cracking and heaving and things happening in the court surface. So it needs to be reconstructed.
Okay, thank you for that. I think I recall the tender and didn't realize it wasn't actually carried through. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? So that being said, we have a mover and we have a seconder. And on the recommended action that the report be and related documents be received for information and discussion, and that the staff amend the budget as discussed or as directed. The only major direction is obviously get the information about the policing, and we can see that if that information comes in much earlier than our meeting planned at the end of October, if that information can be provided to us, just so that we've got that to go ahead, that would be appreciated. And if we get any information from cost recoveries as well. So that being said, if we could have a vote on the motion. All those in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you very much. Okay, now we'll move on to the second request, which is the community capital grant request. Recommended action that the 2022 capital funding request of $10,000 from the Georgian Bay Cancer Support Center be approved and funded through the 2022 community capital grant program budget. Could I have a mover, please? Thank you, Councillor Clue, and a seconder, Mayor LaRue. Any discussion? Did everyone have a chance to review what they want to do with it? It is in our budget. All those in favor? Thank you, that is passed. Item number 3. Now, again, these items are not part of our budget. It will increase our budget requests, but whether we can take a look at it. The planner for the full-time position. The recommended action that the 2022 budget include an increased operating expense of $32,454 to replace the contract junior planner position to a full-time planner position. If we could have a mover, please, to put it on the floor. Councillor Levy, seconder, Councillor Clue, you'd have her up. And discussion, please. Councillor Vadamoncourt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And my apologies to the chair of the Planning and Development section. She wasn't able to make our section meeting, but I did mention to the director at the meeting that although I'm supportive of the position and I understand the logic and the rationale, that I could not support the motion as it's written in our agenda, for the reasons that I outlined earlier. I don't feel that we have all the information, and I want to consider the other factors in the budget. So the way it's written right now, we're going to include it, and I can't support including it at this particular point. I think to borrow the clerk's term, I think it should be tabled, and we should review it when we have further information. So I'm not 100% sure in terms of how to do that from a procedural standpoint, but that's my suggestion, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Vadamoncourt. Councillor LaRose.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would concur. If we look at items 3 and items 4 together, they would add another 1% tax increase, approximately. So instead of being near our 1.5, we'd be over 3, and that would indicate that we have to do a whole lot of changes. So we don't know how many of those changes we're going to need to do till we figure out the policing part. So at this point, I would find items 3 and 4 both premature for us to really deal with tonight.
Thank you very much. Councillor Levy.
Thank you. Am I unmuted?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. I don't mind the delaying. I just very much support the request from the Director of Planning. This is the busiest the planning department's been in ages. And I'd like you all to remember, we've added bylaw, which used to be under finance and general government, back up under the planning director's purview, and the department's grown, and she has a part-timer, and we need to make that full-time. We have at least 7 active developments, which is an all-time record for Penetanguishene. And if you'll recall, back in the day of our former planner, Paul Hodgins, I think it was Councillor Clue who he hired as his second planner, and there was not nearly the workload. So yeah, the workload definitely says we need another planner. I'm not sure that the increase in policing should eliminate that position, but anyway, leaving it go for now is fine by me. I will advocate hard for it when the time comes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Oh, Mayor LaRue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I probably wouldn't have much of an issue with having the number 4 reviewed further. I think there's possibility there that other scenarios or ways of getting around that at the public works part event would probably be worked, and looking at that one further. However, in the planner position, I'm more in favor that we do proceed with that. And we have to remember that, as Councillor Levy has pointed out, our planning department has been busier in this past 2 or 3 years than it's ever been in many years. And also looking at is that we call it a planning director, but at the same time, our planner director is also head of building, head of bylaw, and head of I don't know what else. And then we looked at we have 5, possibly 6 subdivisions on the go, and so the workload has become extensive. So I cannot see why we would not proceed with number 3.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I just wanted to add my comments. I mean, the junior planner position is a full-time position now, and reviewing the information that we had looked at, like it's a full-time contract position right now. This was originally brought before council last year to make it from part-time to full-time, and at that point, it was requested that we do it as a 2-year contract, and so this is actually moving it up a year ahead of time. So I just wanted to keep that in mind. But what we are suggesting, and I will defer to our clerk in this regard, are we able to defer both of these requests to be presented at the next budget meeting when we have further information? Or like, I mean, I know we've brought that on the floor. So do we defeat that motion or amend it so that it will be discussed at the next budget meeting? Is that a possibility?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So there's a few options. I think it's important to remember that this first draft, when things are included, it's not the final be all end all. It's approved, everyone agrees, it's happening. So this is kind of the first draft. Carrie's going to bring back another draft, and there's going to be opportunity for things to be added and removed going forward. So so there's a few options. So first of all, these requests could be referred back to staff or tabled, as Councillor Vadabancourt noted, and which would sort of bring it back as a second presentation when the second draft comes up. It could just be referred back to staff, which means it would appear on the agenda again, exactly how it is for council to consider. It could be approved. They both could be approved today, for example, but then there could also be motions removing them in the next meeting. Like, so there's a lot of options. It's really truly an opportunity for council to work through this and fully understand it. So however you'd like to proceed, I do understand that you do have a mover and a seconder. And I think, what becomes problematic is if it's defeated tonight, that becomes problematic because, it takes it out of the conversation, when it's just defeated and off the table. So I would advise against doing that if council still wants to actually consider it in the future. So yeah, so I don't know if that answers the question, if that gives you enough options about how to proceed. Too many options, maybe?
Yes, well, let's see. Because it is on the floor at the moment, I would like to ask our director of planning if she just wants to maybe bring forward any more information that would help for my mind as to moving it, like, because we are moving this ahead of schedule as far as I can tell from our previous reports. So Andrea, if you can comment on that, I'd appreciate it.
Thanks, Councillor Sanama, and thanks for the conversation being had at council tonight. To be honest, I don't recall that the budget was approved as a 2-year contract. I know each operating budget, I think, is a 2-year approval, but I think each position is, the contract can only be offered each 1 year. So the position itself is a 1-year contract that we would have to renew, extend into the 2nd year, because it's all subject to annual budget approvals, is how I understand it. And I don't know if Carrie or would like to add to that. You've heard it from members of council tonight and in the staff report. The department is so busy and it's hard to keep up. There's a lot going on, and planning is complicated, more advanced or more technical these days. So the requirements for actually just fulfilling the planning obligation for the municipality are also increasing every year. So for a variety of reasons, this position, in my opinion, needs to be equal to the tasks that they're performing. The position is not a junior type role. They are acting in a capacity that I believe the town should be recognizing through the permanent contract and through the title change, and really help the municipality in their service for planning and development continue to meet our goals there. So hopefully that answers your questions, but Carrie may be able to add to your question about the 2-year approval.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it wasn't a 2-year budget approval. From what I read on the report, it was a 2-year to look at it, just to see how things were going and which way we were going to move ahead in that regard. Councillor Vadebooncourt.
Thank you. As I indicated off the top, I didn't want to get into the merits of it. I said I would support it, but I think the timing of it, dealing with it tonight, is not in my mind the right time. So I'd like to move that the report be tabled and it be considered the next time, the second roll up of the budget. So I would move that, and if there's a seconder, that would be great.
So, okay, Mayor LaRue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would have no problems going along with Councillor Vadebooncourt as long as I realize that we're not losing this in the shuffle.
Exactly, and I think if we can, for our mover and seconder, as it was initially proposed, if we can amend it, amend the recommendation. Madam Clerk, if you can help me on this and make sure I don't mess it up completely. If the original mover and seconder agree to amending the motion so that it can be brought forward at the next meeting, is that feasible?
Well, in essence, Councillor Vadebooncourt is doing that by moving for the motion to be tabled. The other movers and seconders don't need to rescind it. It's part of the process, and we can process it if Councillor Vadebooncourt has a seconder and council votes on tabling the motion. It's essentially the same effect.
That's good. Okay, that's what I need. Thank you very much. So if we could have a seconder for, thank you, Councillor LaRose. And all those in favor? So moved. Thank you very much. So the next item, number 4, is for the Roads Division staffing request. And
I'm sorry, Madam Chair. I think, what was that, Councillor Vadebooncourt's motion for both of those positions to, oh, sorry. Nope.
Yeah, we have to do, because the other motion was already on the floor. And so before I read this motion, I was going to recommend, unless we want to have discussion with it tonight. We want it to be added. Councillor Vademoncourt, please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think with the spirit and intent of the meeting tonight is that staff would like to understand where council's minds are with respect to the budget that's being presented to us. So I think it would only be fair that we have a brief discussion on this particular staffing request, similar to what we did on the last ones. Staff have an idea or sense of where people's minds are with these positions. I fully respect that, you know, to get it on the floor, you might need a mover and a seconder, but I think that I'd be happy to move forward with a tabling after it's there so that it could follow a similar vein to the planner. But I think a discussion, I think, would be helpful to staff. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you so much for your guidance in that regard. Mayor Leroux.
Along those lines, Madam Chair, where do we go in so much as do we get a mover and a seconder now to discuss and get a report, or ask our Director of Public Works to give us a rundown as to what this is all about and what the request is all about, so that we can more understand it a little better?
Yes, that is what we will do. Thank you so much. So the recommended action that the 2022 budget include an increased operating expense of $62,912 to include the changes to the seasonal contract staffing as outlined within the staff report. If I could have a mover for that, please. Councillor Clue, and a seconder. Mayor Leroux. And so we will now open the floor for discussion. Mayor Leroux.
And Madam Chair, as I indicated, I think perhaps I would like to hear from our Director of Public Works in regards to this issue.
Thank you. Ryan.
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you to His Worship. The report being brought forward as part of this meeting tonight is to restructure and replace some of the short-term contracts that we currently have within the roads division during the summer and winter months. Right now, we currently hire 4 short-term contracts in the wintertime. That includes a road patrol position over the weekends. And then we hire 2 summer operators during the summer season. The intent of this restructuring would be to replace 2 of those short-term contracts with 11-month longer-term contracts. And the purpose of that is to address some of the training and the turnover that we're seeing in those positions because they are such short-term contracts. We're running into issues with both the summer and the winter, particularly in the winter season, where the short-term contracts are not attracting many of the more experienced and higher skilled operators. So we're seeing a lot of turnover in those positions. We're expending a lot of time training due to these short-term contracts, and we're incurring equipment damage, property damage, doing training, particularly in the winter season. So the road supervisor and I were discussed this, and to address that issue that we're seeing is to replace 2 of those short-term contract positions with 11-month contracts, and that will provide a more desirable position for these operators, which would serve both in the winter and the summertime, and provide a good roster of staff that would stay with us from year to year, and then reduce our staff time training these operators and reducing the turnover that we're seeing. So that's the main thrust of this ask being brought forward to council tonight.
Thank you very much, Director Murray. That was greatly appreciated. Council, would you like to make any statements, any questions? Councillor Vademont-Coeur. Oh, you're muted.
Thank you. Well, the director is here to respond to questions. I have just a question with respect to level of service. I'd ask the director to comment, setting aside the training requirements and his comments about damage and whatnot during training. Is there any improvement to the level of service that the municipality would be providing to the residents if we move to this model of staffing? Thank you.
Thank you. Through Madam Chair to Councillor Vademont-Coeur. While we're not increasing staffing levels in either the summer or winter periods, we're simply just replacing contracts with a longer term contract. I do see a benefit in customer service and service levels just by simply having staff members, higher skilled or maybe more qualified members being hired for these contracts because they would be more desirable. And having these staff members roll over from year to year and coming back, I do see a benefit to our service levels because of that, and getting used to our routes, our service, our snow removal, just our operations from a year to year basis. I do see an increase there.
Thank you very much. I mean, having read the report, and I certainly do appreciate the fact that it would certainly make a difference in just your whole staffing requirements. But when you're not spending as much time training everybody every 18 weeks or so, that does make a huge difference. Councillor Vademont-Coeur.
Thank you. So, I understand what the director is saying, and I think that, there's logic to his report. We hire seasonal staff 4.5 months in the winter because that's our peak winter season, and then we hire some staff in the summer because that's our peak summer season, and we do with what we have as our full-time complement during the shoulder season. So that's kind of not as peak as the other seasons. So I think the director is in response to my question said, yeah, there could be additional efficiencies because we'd have these additional contract staff for 11 months as opposed to 2 or 3, 4.5 month stints. So you get some coverage during the shoulder seasons of fall and the spring. So I think that's a good thing. So I think there's some logic in his report. And again, as I said, I'd like to consider his report as we consider the second roll up of the budget, and we can consider all the proposed changes. And Madam Chair, with that, I'll move a motion to table this report to the next time we have the discussion, and we'll see if we can if I can find a seconder. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Levy, you were willing to second it? Thank you. And all those in favor to table it to our next set of discussions? That's so moved. Thank you very much. Question period from the media and public. Oh, Mr. Huguenin, see your hand up. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much, Councillor Sanema. I had a chance to look at the budget 10-year capital project, and I'm going to put this into a question for council. Where do they see the 2022 budget survey where the public gave input, to which I'm thankful to the finance director for attaching the letter that my wife and I had put the request for council to consider a budget item for the three-way intersection of Robert, Dufferin, and Burr. And when I looked at the 10-year capital plan, somewhere off 10 years from now in 2031, there's a line item about Robert Street engineering from Fuller to Main Street. And I don't see anything about the three-way intersection. And I recall from the summer that council put some interest and some discussion between the three-way intersection. So it's a recent item. And I do see in the 10-year capital a recent item of interest that's very recent from a month ago that found its way into the 10-year capital for 2027 under Public Works. So will council be able to put some thoughts towards the intersection of Robert, Dufferin, and Burr as part of that public input? That's my question. Would they be able to put their thoughts to that?
Thank you very much for your question. It is a good, and I, as chair, I will ask the question to our director Murray. When you were doing some of your discussions, was that issue brought up? Because it certainly was it is part of our referral, or it was recommended earlier by council to include it in the discussions with this overall plan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I did have, I was including the intersection analysis as part of the reconstruction design, which Mr. Huguenin has noted is in the 2031 budget. So the overall analysis, traffic analysis of that intersection, among others along that stretch on Robert Street East, would be analyzed as a fulsome project, not as a standalone project, as Mr. Huguenin is suggesting. It would be actually looked at and analyzed as part of the overall engineering of the reconstruction of Robert East. And that's during our budget deliberations. That is the year that we selected for that.
Councillor Klug, thank you very much, Mr. Murray. Councillor Klug.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to add to that, because we discussed this in our section meeting, we have a lot of projects that are deemed quite urgent in nature. And I think what we're trying to do is go down the list and deal with the items that the infrastructure is the oldest, and we're trying to address those as we go. In terms of that intersection, I think council still agrees that it's a priority item. However, in terms of capital projects, it will be part of the full Robert Street study. And in the meantime, I think it's prudent of us to consider other options, perhaps some traffic calming measures where the budget isn't impacted in such a way that a full reconstruction of that intersection would require.
Thank you very much, Councillor Klug. All right. So at this moment, Mr. Huguenin, did you have another question?
I just hope that council realizes that a traffic impact study doesn't deal with the concerns of the 56 neighbors who signed the petition, who drive that. Even councillor in the neighborhood is aware and has taken note as to how he approaches the intersection. So we all in town are aware of the intersection. And from seeing other traffic impact studies that are done at the engineering level, they, in my understanding, they're putting out traffic count meters, seeing what the traffics are in the morning, in the AM, and in the afternoon in the PM. And they're looking at numbers. Rather, what the neighbors are looking at is the safety. And I don't know if an engineering traffic impact study translates into the safety where you have 13 school buses doing delivery to the French language school down Dufferin twice per day. So you have an entire bus straddling the three-way intersection as well as the neighbors. And the other item is I'm fully aware of all the different individual projects that come along that are in need of priority. But I do know,
Madam Chair, point of order. It's a question period.
Yes, not a statement period, and thank you. Thank you, Your Worship. And I was going to comment on that, Mr. Hugan, and we certainly will take that, the information into consideration, but it is a question period.
Can I ask one question then, if I may, please, with respect? So the question is, how does council feel about having removed three-way intersection from the previous official plan that dates back to the 1970s to when the new official plan came into 2019, where for over 50 years it was on the books of Penetanguishene through their official plan document that intersection was a priority, and now we're looking at another 10 years. How does council feel about that? Are they comfortable with that? So it would now become 60 years later?
That is a very good question, and at this moment, I cannot provide an answer for you. It will come up for discussion with our planning department.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So that being said, I'll turn it back to you, Mayor LaRue. Oh, sorry, Mr. Murray. I see your hand up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to point out, because when these discussions came forward to council, I made an inquiry with the OPP to determine the number of collisions that have actually happened at that intersection between the years of 2014 and 2020, and there's only one recorded collision that's occurred in that intersection during that time, just for council's information.
Thank you very much for that information. Mayor LaRue, turn it back to you.
Thank you, Councillor Saint-Amand. I would like to take this opportunity actually to thank staff, and in particular the finance department, on a very thorough first round draft of our budget. Thank you all for the job well done. And I will ask for a mover to adjourn.